Welcome back to the YouTube channel. Look who's here.
Hello.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly, I'm Geoff Logan, Councillor for Norton North.
And how long have you been a councillor for?
I've been Councillor for Norton North for almost exactly 1 year, since the elections last May, and before that I was Beechwood Councillor for 9 years.
Yes.
I did have a period being a councillor before then, but there were gaps because of my professional life, which I needed to. Basically, I was a deputy head in a high school in Manchester, and that became very time consuming.
It does. I mean, let's talk about that a minute. I mean, are you a teacher?
Yes.
Did you teach for a long time before?
For a long time. I started my teaching career at the Heath School in Runcorn, and from there I went to what was then Brookvale Comprehensive School, which became Halton High School, which has become Ormiston Bolingbroke.
Yes.
And then I went to, as one does, I moved around in my career, and one of the places I was at was Wythenshawe, Brookway High School in Wythenshawe, which is when I was deputy head, and it was, sometimes we were having meetings till way into the early evening, and it was impossible to be at the meetings that I would need to be at if I was a councillor.
Yeah, and obviously being a councillor is time consuming as well, because you're getting out more. Is it getting tougher to do that? To get out and
tougher
canvas?
To get out and canvas?
And canvas and
all those things. Is it getting tougher? I don't think so. I think it's always been full. We know when something's full, it's full, and it's full. So.
And what's the most challenging thing right now that you're having to face?
The most challenging thing, it's almost a cliche, sometimes we get engaged with residents who have got particular issues, and they will preface what they're saying with, and don't tell me it's because of the cuts. Well, we've had £50 million worth of cuts to Halton Council, so unfortunately sometimes that is the answer. I've noticed, for instance, that some people are concerned about just this week that it's been announced that some of the cafes are closing in libraries and in buildings like that. So, we've got we have statutory duties, things that we have to do in law. And those are the things that we're getting very near now to worrying about, because over the last few years we have to make massive cuts. So we've made massive cuts in things which we don't have to do by law, but now we're getting very near to those things that we do have to do by law, and we're worrying about how we're managing to do it. Not that cafes was something that we had to do by law, but it's one of those things that we're really thinking, what can we stop doing, which is costing money, not a lot of money, but it's costing some money, and those are the things we're at the moment.
Yeah, because it is becoming a very difficult time.
It's very, very
for
difficult.
Individual businesses, for individual councils.
Well, just today, the 1st of April, isn't it? And the energy prices have gone up, and people are being hit with those, and there's a national insurance increases and so on. It's very, very difficult for people, and can only get more difficult until the government actually takes responsibility in some way, central government.
Well, focusing on the national problems at the moment, do you think Labour stand a good chance locally to gain some support, even more support, because of what the Tories on the national level are doing?
I'd like to think so. I would like to think that people recognise that a caring government would not just be standing by and allowing these things to be as bad as they are. And I'm not saying that Labour would be able to solve every single problem immediately. But for instance, there is no reason why some of the energy companies, oil companies, could not have had a windfall tax, because they've made millions of pounds of profits. And before just immediately saying to the ordinary family, this is at your door, you're paying for this, why not tax those very, very rich companies that have made profits over and above what they were supposed to be making? And the Labour Party would do that.
Well, I saw Keir Starmer's plan to tax and take that and put it back into helping people with their energy and stuff. And it is a step in the right direction in terms of practical stuff, giving people 5p off petrol and all these little nonsenses.
And selling people, they will have £200 off their bills. Oh, but it's a loan, and we're taking it back from you at £50 a year.
When it's more expensive.
We'll put you into debt so that we can help you.
Yeah.
So the loan sharks won't come round the more vulnerable people and say, here's 200 quid. I mean, it's just... It's
a fantasy, isn't it? But that's...
It's cynical. I would say that, but I think they are very cynical. I think that, well, I don't think they really care about the average person. Then they will say it's the biggest tax cut since, you know, anyway.
Yeah, well, this is why the reason why I asked is because Labour are pretty safe in this borough, and they're pretty well, you know, supported in general. And I know the Greens are starting to do more. What is it like in your ward in terms of support? Are you happy, and are things good at the moment?
What I think is that the local councillor should be representing that ward.
Yeah.
And really, if the local people do not want that local councillor, then I think there's either something that local councillor isn't doing, or that there's something to do with the policies which people are against. So when you say, are things good, I would like to think, well, the last week, if I think about the things that I've dealt with on an individual basis for individual people, I know that I've been visiting people's houses and dealing with issues which are very important to them, because the day-to-day issues are the things which hit people the most. So I've been visiting someone in Norton North. I went to visit someone in Norton North this week, and it was about somewhere that they go walking every day, and they're very concerned that other people that go walking on that same place are sometimes inconvenienced by overgrown bushes, overgrown brambles, which in the great scheme of things, if we're thinking about Ukraine and the cost of living crisis, maybe they're not that important, but on a day-to-day basis, those are the things that change people's lives and make them either happy or unhappy, and satisfied or dissatisfied. And I've acted upon that, and straight away with that particular issue, the resident said, these bushes have not been cut for, she was very precise, 11 years. And so I looked into it, and I've managed to get straight away, they will be trimmed within the next week or two. And then in September, when the nesting season's over, they'll be cut right back. So straight away, that made an impact on that person and the people that she sees going along that path and having to move to one side, and the cyclists that are struggling when people suddenly appear and are walking along that path. There's more space. It makes their life better. It makes people feel better about things. So as a councillor, if I'm doing that, then I would hope that people would see that I'm able to respond to the residents' wishes. And so when you said, how do I think it's going? Personally, I feel I'm doing the job as a councillor, both in terms of an individual's life, but also in the strategic things that we have to deal with as well. So if people don't think I'm doing a good job, then that's their democratic right. So, you know, only time will tell if at the ballot box people turn out and vote for me and vote for Labour because of the way I behave as a councillor, because of Labour policies. Then if they don't like those things, so be it. That's democracy. And that's, you know, that's the beauty of it.
I think the biggest bugbear, and I think you put this on your leaflet, was the building, the shared building on the green spaces and stuff, which, as I can see, you've been really working in the background to support the opposition. So give it us in a nutshell what you actually think of this and what's your stand on it. Obviously you're probably in tune with Mike Ainsbury with this, which is very much appropriate housing in appropriate areas. Yeah,
well, yes, definitely. And you know, I see Mike regularly, and we speak regularly, and we will disagree about some things, but the bottom line is we have the same philosophy, we have the same ideology, and that translates into the way we treat our environment and the way that we treat the residents and their interaction with that environment. But when you say, what are my views on it, it's very, it's complex. And I don't want to give you a glib answer, so I'll start talking, and then you can stop me and say, okay, we've got the message.
Okay.
Right, so in terms of, we're specifically talking about Sandymore and Warford, that development?
Yes.
Yep, okay.
Because Starsbury's a done deal.
Yep. So with that particular plot of land, area of land, and with that development, going back to 1971, it was identified as an area of land that would have houses built on it. It was for residential developments. That's not just that Sandymore and Warford place now, but all the Sandymore development. Yeah. And then I think it was 1989, it became part of the Newtown Commission's responsibility, and again they said, right, we're really going to be developing Runcorn further. Obviously in the 1970s all that began, and I think Windmill Hill was built 40-something years ago, but that was where it all started. And then the New Town Commission became Homes for England, and throughout those things there were plans, there were master plans, there were local plans, and they're constantly being revisited and agreed upon. So in 2005, the Halton local plan was passed through the council. Then again, a few years later, and very recently, that local plan has been passed through. And all the time, central government is checking on those things, and threatening is probably too strong a word, but no, it's not. Threatening to bring in commissioners. I don't know if you know what happened to Wirral Council. They didn't produce a local plan, and the government said, right, we're sending commissioners in unless by this time next week or the week after, or whatever it is, you produce this local plan. So when you don't do things, there are outcomes that the residents would not want. Now, I always make, I'm going to say this, I'm an Everton fan, right? And I always make the,
Don't tell him that.
I always make the comparison with a midfielder called Mark Pembridge, who used to play for Everton. And you never knew he was there. You thought, people say, what is the point of Mark Pembridge? But when he didn't play, you knew why he played, because there were big gaps and so on. Now, if the council hadn't been doing these things, we would have lost local democracy, because the commissioners would have come in and the commissioners would have been running the place and saying, this is what we're doing it. And commissioners don't take any responsibility of people who say, the brambles are growing over my path.
Yeah, local accountability.
It needs to be local accountability. So the council, in principle, was faced with this situation, right? So in principle, that land has been there for development. I live in Sandymore, so it would be somehow it sits uneasily for me to say, I live in Sandymore and I'm okay because I've got my house there, but they're stopping here now. That's, because there is a principle of Sandymore being developed.
Yes.
So that's the principle, which I understand. However, that land to me does not seem to be the right place for housing. So what do I do about it? What have I done about it? Well, there's nothing to object to at the moment, because that principle has been there since 1971. What we can object to is planning. When planning applications come out, we can object to them.
Yes.
But I've personally, as a local councillor, I have preempted that, or I've tried to preempt it in a certain way. So I've made local inquiries about particular things that I'll come back to. I've written to Peter Freeman. Peter Freeman is the head of Homes England. And I've written to him and I've said, I think this, use those keywords floodplain and flooding, which I'm still not sure about. Again, we can come back to that. And I've said, I don't think you're doing the right thing, because Homes England have now got an extra remit, and their remit now is to improve neighbourhoods, is one phrase I've taken from it. Our remit is to improve neighbourhoods. The day after I read that, I went out to Norton, to the canal area, and I took a picture of the canal. And it was a sunny day, and there was a duck in the middle of the canal with a piece of twig branch, and it was taking it across. It was going to do something with it, and then just under the bridge, the Burrows Bridge.
Yeah,
I didn't say Burrows Bridge, but obviously the Burrows Bridge. There were two swans, just being swans, and I thought, how can you improve this? If their remit is to improve neighbourhoods, and then the next phrase is bring communities together. The community's together. The community loves that area. You cannot get a better setting than that canal with the wildlife and all the rest of it that's there.
Well,
it's remarkable.
It's something I've loved for a while, and when the draft came up of this is what we may do with Sandymore, Walford Farm area, it included knocking down the bridge or removing it, and we really kicked off about it. And then you went, oh no, we're going to build another bridge.
Deny that, yeah.
We're going to put one right next to it, won't harm it. But the proximity to that is the problem.
Yeah. Well,
and like you said, the pristineness of what's left it alone for so long is going to be lost.
So I've written to Peter Freeman and I've said this, but I would really like you to come to Runcorn, visit it, see it yourself, so I can point that out to you, and not just the beauty of the place, but the hazards, the problems that I can see, that I would be interested in what you think of what you can see. So I've written to him, and I've also written to Stuart Andrew, who is the Housing Minister, in a very similar way, that I do not think that Homes England, which is, by the way, an arm of the government. And guess who
Yes.
the government is? Us.
Yes.
And yet, if you're walking along that towpath, there are signs every few metres, Homes England, private land.
Yes.
Keep out. Well, hold on.
I
Government,
used to say that. How dare they?
government of the people, by the people, for the people. It's us.
Yes.
How, if it's private, it's ours, surely.
Level crossing.
Okay.
They've moved out now, and it's empty, and they've boarded it all up, fenced it off, put guard dogs in, and whatever. And you're not allowed to walk near it or whatever. And you're like, but if this is Homes England doing this, or developers doing this, it's out of order, isn't it?
It is, but it's not, and it's not just in Halton, not just in Runcorn. I was talking to another lady on in Norton North this week about another issue, and she said to me that she's recently been to Cornwall, and that her sister that lives in Cornwall said to her, "Look at this," and she pointed out a parcel of land, a piece of land, and guess what was on the piece of land? Homes England. It's everywhere.
Those signs
it's
are
awful.
well. It's so forest,
it just
forest.
riles you when you see that sign. So I've written to Stuart Andrew, and I've also said, I'm concerned about the aspects that we're going to lose. I'm also concerned about actually the validity of that land as building land. Until I see a planning application, I can't see that won't work. I can't object to it. I can't say that won't work, that won't work.
Well,
at the moment, I'm
sorry
stuck
to
with the
interrupt, but
principle.
they did a consultation.
Yep.
Did you go to that?
I did, yes, and I put in my submission.
And
Yeah.
they didn't know anything.
No.
You'd go and you'd ask them a question and he wouldn't know the answer. They'd point you off to another person, and that person didn't know, and they'd point you back to the other person. They're like that, and it's like they didn't expect people to ask questions.
No.
And I think that's the problem with local accountability and democracy at the moment.
A thing that particularly annoyed me about that consultation was that if there's going to be so many houses and so many people, then the facilities that we've got generally probably wouldn't satisfy the needs, but certainly I feel there would be a need for some kind of extra primary care with regards to a GP surgery. Yeah. And when they've asked that question, their answer is, if someone approaches us and says they would like to open a surgery, we would look very favourably upon that. Which is, to me, that's another government agency abdicating responsibility. They should say, we recognise this is very important and we will be facilitating that. Not, should somebody come to us, then we'll look upon it. Otherwise, excuse me, we're just going to build houses. I've written to those people and invited them to come and visit the actual site and see. I've also made inquiries about, in 2008, Halton High School was... in fact, it was before Ormiston Bolingbroke, it was Halton High School. And it was going to be reconfigured. And there were opportunities for it either to be built or rebuilt or developed on the site it's actually on now, which was Brookvale Comprehensive, or to be built on a brand new site. Guess where were they thinking of building it? Sandymore and Warford. Now, it didn't happen. There was a government scheme called Building Schools for the Future, and it was hoped that the money for the new school would come from that. But the funds weren't forthcoming, and the building was stopped. Now, some people are also saying to me, it wasn't just that, it was just that the land wasn't suitable to be built upon. Now, it's interesting to hear that, and it's also something that maybe, do Homes England know that? When they now are, I think January the 24th, they began their boreholes, putting drills down in it to check the land. It'd be interesting to see what they found from that. One of the residents of Norton North was out walking her dog on that when they were there, and she was chatting to the men, and a white car suddenly pulled up. She says it was a white car. I don't know if that's significant. But the person inside it had a white safety helmet on, which is clearly significant. Like in cowboy films, when the good guy has the white hat, you've probably done. Good guy's the white hat, all the others have very dark hats. Well, he was the boss. He had a white helmet on. And he pulled up, and I said to him, you need to be careful, you're not going to be able to get out of here. And he took that as a threat, thinking that she was saying to him, hey, you're one of the bosses, are you? Well, you better be careful because we'll let you out. Anyway, she said, oh, what are you doing? What are you saying? She said, I don't know what you mean. And he drove off. And guess what happened to his car as he drove off? It began to sink. So it went, the wheels, the tyres settled. And when she went back the next day, the men said to her, because they saw her as being on their side, having challenged their boss, You should have seen the palaver after you'd gone. We couldn't get that car out, so we tied a rope to it. The rope snaps. It was just getting... Now, they can't even manage the material to check the quality of the land. And when they do, if they ever do come to build upon it and cover things with tarmac and drives and so on when the gardens... Right, I've also heard that they're going to build the houses, if they build them, on floating platforms.
I've heard that, yeah.
But are the gardens going to be on floating platforms? You know, because so that will supposed to mitigate against any so-called flooding. Well, what's going to happen to the gardens? If they need that, what's happened to the gardens? We don't know. We don't. No, I know. It's a rhetorical question.
I'm doing that rhetorically. Who knows?
Now, so these are all questions that need to be asked, but these are all things that can be challenged once they are real. So at the moment, all we've got is a principle.
Yes.
When we've got a planning application, then we can look at it and say, well, that. Is it right? Is it going to work? Who's going to suffer as a result of this? The Environment Agency have done several reports on that land over the years, and if you look through their reports, they make reference to the floodplain. But within Homes England website, there is one sentence on its own that says, this is not a floodplain. Now, which is it? Is it the Environment Agency or is it Homes England?
Well, actually, did you go to the Environment Agency meeting at the council?
No.
The Sandymore Parish. Really interesting because they feel like they're banging their head against a brick wall. They feel that they're stuck between rock and a hard place. They're trying to stop the issues that Homes England are creating. And instead of actually coming out and saying it, they're going around with platitudes.
Yeah.
Because I asked them a question. I said, because COP26 just happened.
Right.
And literally it was all about working with the environment, not destroying habitats, getting carbon capture from the grass and the ground and trees. And I said, what is your principle then? Are you working with Homes England to get these houses? Are you going to support your own argument? Which is it? And they wouldn't answer. And I feel like they can't because they're getting sort of gazumped by a bigger body. What do you think of Keckwick Brook and all these other places that are getting surrounded by houses right now? It's that worrying.
Yes, yeah. It worries me, but within the Homes England vague outlines, they make commitments to protecting things like that. They make commitments to having wildlife areas and making sure that flora and fauna are protected. I don't know quite what that means because they are very, very vague terms. And again, once we know exactly what their plans are, once a planning application appears, because there is no planning application, it's all principle at the moment, then we will be able to challenge that. But the Warford Basin, for instance, you know what, I keep reading about these things which are there for reasons. How are they going to deal with those things? Again, I'm repeating myself, but until we see the planning application.
Do you know specifically, before we move on, do you know dates for final?
No. We're just waiting. And we ask, has anything come through from Homes England yet? No, nothing yet. This is because it would go straight to the offices of the council. And then we would ask, obviously they'd tell us it was in, but no, there's nothing appeared yet at all.
I think what makes, especially you know this being a councillor, but you must hear the anger and the frustration from residents who just feel that they're just not being listened to. It's just happening without their consent, because even you said about the 70s and the plan that was always in place, it still wasn't our choice to have this built. And all we see is more and more this green space going, and it's come to people like me to oppose it as well, you know, give them a free time to oppose it. And obviously yourself and Mike Ainsbury and the Greens have been actively involved. But what more can we do?
I hate to keep repeating myself, but until the planning application comes through, there's nothing specific we can say, well, we don't like that, or we don't like that, or can you prove that, or how will you mitigate that? At the moment, we're faced with a principle which has been there since 1971. And so we can't object to the principle because it's enshrined almost. And until the planning application comes through, all we can do is keep raising the awareness of the people who are in the positions of authority. So I've written to Peter Freeman, I've written to Stuart Andrew, and I've said, come up and see this place and explain to me and others how it will improve the neighbourhood, how it will bring communities together, because I can't see that. And your plans, when they materialise, will be aiming to meet those strategic aims, which is...
Have they replied?
No.
How
Oh, yeah, I've had an acknowledgement. Yes. We've received your letter, and someone will be in touch within eventually. And when it does, I'll let you know when they respond to me.
It'd be good to see.
I mean, it would be great if they said. I mean, that would be it. I'd be shocked if they said, if Stuart Andrew or Peter Freeman said, right, we're coming up on the train tomorrow. I've written separately one. It's not a joint letter that I've written. It's two separate things. And I would love for one of them to say, I want to see what you're talking about. I mean, that would be ideal, but we'll wait and see.
Well, I hope that something comes from that, because you're hitting the right marks in terms of getting people like that to come and see, and holding them to account and say, well, it's up to you to prove to me how this works. I know... Excuse
me, not just me, but the residents.
Yes,
because I'm doing this because the residents want it to happen, want me to be involved in doing this, and I've had to tread very carefully so that I know where the line is between the things that I can make a difference about and the principle, which I can't make any, because it's there and it's been there, and it's just saying this land has been assigned as land that's for housing. So in Sandymore itself, there is a place, if you look at the maps, there is a place in Sandymore which has always been for a junior school, for a primary school. And I know exactly where it is, 'cause it's the back of one of our friends' houses. They know it's there. They saw the plans before they bought the house. Not that they will object to being, they don't object to being a school there, but it's always been there. We know it's there in principle, but there isn't an actual plan to build a school yet. Yeah. And that's the same situation we're in. So with the whole Sandymore and Warford development, until we get the planning application, we can't object. But your question was, what can you do? We can keep raising awareness. We can write to the people in authority. We can ask them to come and visit. We can talk them through, see what they will actually be, what possible plans could damage what is already, probably the last wild place in Runcorn.
Yes, because, like you say, carbon capture, let's say climate change is a big problem. And their big thing is, let's protect these places so nature takes care of that. And then let's plant more trees, because I know the council said the other day, we're planting more trees. Yeah. But we're also building on places that do that automatically, naturally. And it's counterproductive, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there is a housing shortage. We need houses, and we need to enable... Another thing that is connected with the whole housing development, which is a concern, is that there are people who are educated in Halton who then don't feel that Halton is a place for them to live. Oh, yeah. And they don't think it's a place for them to live because there aren't the employment opportunities for them. So if you're a graduate who thinks, could I go back and live in Halton and work? And you think, well, where would I work? Where are the jobs for me there? Now, the whole SciTech Daresbury complex, I mean, it's world class. We all know that. And there will be more and more opportunities there. And that will be a place that people can see themselves working. And the model that is often put forward is the model of Widnes. I don't know how much you know Widnes, but years ago, well, now there is a development which is known now as the Upton Rocks development, which is houses similar to the Sandymore and Norton Cross area, where the housing there is similar to in Upton Rocks. And that housing development is put forward as one of the ways in which the centre of Widnes was revitalised. And years ago, for instance, you know where Morrison's is?
Yes.
Right. So that area, which is spread out, so you've now got a Marks and Spencer's, and you've got other shops which have come to Widnes because people will shop at those shops. Now, years ago, I know that Marks and Spencer's were approached. Whatever you think of Marks and Spencer's, this is just, I'm saying it because it's true. My mum would turn in a grave if I was to say anything bad about Marks and Spencer's.
I don't shop at Marks and Spencer's.
But Marks and Spencer's wouldn't come to Widnes. They said it had a negative psychological profile. I've always remembered those words. A negative psychological profile.
On who?
The rest of the world outside Widnes. And so they wouldn't come. Now they're there. They have got. So something's changed. The psychological profile as they see it of Widnes has changed. And I think that some people think that all these things are interconnected, and the shopping city could be redeveloped, and the shopping city could be improved if people who have been educated in Halton and come and get the higher paid jobs in Halton come back to live in Halton.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a guy born and bred in Runcorn, it's always been frustrating because the potential in Runcorn has always been further back to what used to be the roots of Runcorn, the old town, the potential of tourism, and there always seems to be lack of care and attention to those places and promotion and making them work. I mean, we're sat now in the castle, and it's taken someone to come in and start really seeing the vision of it and promoting it on his own. Is Halton Borough Council sort of lazy in that regard?
Well, the answer is no. No, it's not lazy. I
know it's a harsh question, but...
Well, it's... Halton Borough Council is very keen to encourage the outside world to come into Halton. You're talking about the castle, which obviously is, look around the walls, there's tremendous history associated with this. Norton Priory Museum, that whole area is remarkable. If it's not unique in the country, it's one of a few places like that. And if you go, just going into Norton Priory itself and going into the underpass or whatever it's called and having undercroft, right, underpass. And going into that area and going to a concert in there, a choir singing, it's just remarkable. And there is a tourism plan. As we are part of the Liverpool City region, and the Liverpool City region wants to. I mean, Steve Rotherham, the Metro Mayor, his catchphrase almost is "No borough left behind," and he's determined to bring all these things to Halton. So there's been some criticism I've seen recently of the work that's being done around the station and the.
Yeah, I mean, are you talking about Station Quarter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of that redevelopment, and it's part of a plan to bring people in. And in the past, if you got off the train at that particular Runcorn station, not Runcorn East, that one, the Runcorn station, what were you faced with? It was just not attractive. And now when you come out, you can see that it's going to be fully opened up. Yeah. And there's going to be all kinds of little things around to draw people in, and then to say, well, look, you know what you could do? Have you seen the canal complex around here? You can get on a boat, you can take a walk down the towpaths, you can go to Norton Priory Museum, you can come up to the castle. There are all kinds of things in Halton. So no, we're not lazy. We have a tourism section of the council which is working with the Liverpool City region to open these things up and to give access to them as well and to publicise them. So
publicity is the key. Key there.
Yeah.
So do you support the Unlock campaign?
Oh, definitely. Yeah,
definitely. It's a great campaign.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But I don't know if there are also criticisms because people are saying, why are you bothering with that campaign, with unlocking the canal system, when there are people who are struggling to make ends meet and to meet the bills and so on. And it's a juggling act because nobody's in any doubt that the cost of living crisis is the thing that is the most worrying thing at the moment. But we cannot just leave other things at the wayside. We've got to be working on those.
The same people who moan when Widnes gets everything.
Well, yes,
when they don't see the vision of what Runcorn could be as a world-class town, which, like you say, the uniqueness of it, Halton Castle.
I was in the Brindley Theatre last night watching a play called Elizabeth, about Elizabeth I.
Oh, I'd like to see that.
And it was a one-woman show, and it was an hour and a half, and it was just one woman giving.
Was it good?
It was remarkable how I'm always amazed by actors anyway, but she had learned that and empathise so much with Elizabeth I. I'd forgotten she was an actress. You know, it was Elizabeth I. Elizabeth I was there talking to us. Anyway, we were in the studio theatre, which is the smaller one, which is wonderful. We've got a smaller one, but we've also got the bigger one.
Balconies.
Yeah. And so that facility in itself, the Brindley Theatre, I think that's unique.
Yes.
And when you come out of the Brindley Theatre now, and it's night time, and you've got the old bridge with lights on it, and you know it's...
We are lucky. This is what I'm trying to point out. We are lucky in Runcorn, in Halton in general, to have these things on our doorstep. And the thing about Norton Priory is that there's a big thing going on at the moment with the housing development that could be next to it, and people are against it. Do you know what I mean? Where the old school used to be, and it's brownfield, but it's being contested because it's so close to Norton Priory. Do you think there should be a development there, or do you reckon we should let Norton Priory breathe a little?
It's the art of politics, isn't it, really? Norton Priory shouldn't be touched at all. You said because it's near to it.
It's proximity.
Yeah, and I understand that, but I also understand the need for housing, and I understand the need for housing development, and we cannot say we will never build houses. Now, I'm not sure how, proximity, I'm not sure how close we say that's too close, that's close enough, and I wouldn't like to say.
Well, I don't particularly mind that one, because it's brownfield. There's risk, the Greens are saying that the land, the green belt has sort of took it back again, or the green space has took it back. But for me, it's not the housing that's the problem, it's the type of housing. For me, we need more social housing in Runcorn, because it's a working class town, isn't it? People go to warehouses, they go to mechanical jobs. It's a working class town, but we're not getting, social housing. We're getting private, where people are moving in.
Yeah, that's a risk. That's a problem. There's a risk. Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Yeah. We're not against housing. I'm with Mike Ainsbury with that. We're not against housing. But if you're building private housing, all you're doing is inviting people in, and they're not going to stay. They're going to go and commute in and out. And that's a problem, isn't it?
It is. We do need to have that mix. We definitely need to have that mix. And you're right, there needs to be more social housing. If only councils could be house builders again, but at the moment we're not. But the fact that we're able to re-regulate the buses, which is another thing that the Liverpool City region is going to do, along with Manchester. So in the Thatcher years, the bus system was deregulated. You can do what you want if you're a bus company, and now it's coming back into the remit of local authorities, so it's local accountability.
Well, we've had the big farce recently with the X1, and the bus network is too closed in with Arriva at the moment.
If you live in East Runcorn, then there was a classic example for me the other week, not just about leisure, but Liverpool City region, with Halton playing a big part, ran an apprentice roadshow almost, but the main hub of that was in Liverpool. So there was one particular evening which was set aside for people in boys and girls in year 10 and their parents, and they could go to the centre of Liverpool and go to the apprentice show and see all the employers and all the colleges, everything that was involved with apprenticeships. And you could get lots of advice, you could find out things. Now, if you live in Windmill Hill, how are you going to get, and in Windmill Hill, 47% of households do not have a car. How are you going to get to Liverpool and back to that apprentice show? There isn't a bus. The buses stop running, 6, 6:30?
5, 6 o'clock we do 1 or 2, and then the X1, which doesn't exist anymore practically. The 110 started doing evenings, but...
So when you say no borough left behind, we need to be very careful that not just no borough is left behind, but no area of each borough is left behind.
Is that an empty platitude, though?
It's. I believe Steve Rotherham believes that, and I believe he wants that to happen. So in terms of it, I can understand it sounding like a platitude, but they're not empty words. They are a firm commitment. It's definitely an aspiration. It's definitely something that he hopes Liverpool City region will achieve.
Well, I'm going to ask an unfair question because I stumbled across this question with the Greens and it stumps them. And it's funny because it's so obvious. Do you think Runcorn should remain, or Halton should remain, a Cheshire province or go completely into Liverpool as a city region? Because there's a lot of backlash, there's a lot of, not backlash, but a lot of hesitancy. So we don't want to be classed as Liverpool. What are you about?
No.
So
No.
what do you think?
There was when the city region was devised, there was some, what should we say? There was some people were concerned about the use of the word Liverpool.
Yeah.
So they wanted the clear advantages that came with that wider metro region, but did not want the word Liverpool involved. But it is based on Liverpool. That's the centre.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably something that we need to look at as a society, not just Liverpool per se, but attitudes and prejudice and bigotry. And it's a wider issue. Why is it that we have those views? I think the situation in Ukraine is another example of that. And I think we've got to try to break down those barriers which are leading to conflict, as we can see in Ukraine, but also conflict in as much as if you come from a particular region, there will be possibly a prejudice against you. And so, on the one hand, I can understand people's worries, although why they're worried about, I can understand worry, but I don't always see the reasons for that worry. I understand
it's about vision again, isn't it? They perceive Runcorn in particular as a Cheshire town, and they want Cheshire to be assigned to it.
Okay,
if
but
when
when
it's a city region,
yeah,
it becomes Liverpool's suburb, and then that's it. There's no uniqueness to it. So to me, I think the main point is that shouldn't we be self-governed on our own in Halton, or do you think that's a backward step?
I don't think that. I would think that. I think that would be a backward step. Yeah, I think that we need to have more delegation from the centre. Everything's too London-centric, and there needs to be more regional government and more of local accountability again. And so I don't think a small place like Runcorn or Halton could manage on its own these days, and I think there needs to be that regionalism. And I think, I'm not going to use the word localism because that was David Cameron, wasn't it? But there needs to, Runcorn and Halton could not stand alone. Now, I think once upon a time, I remember a friend of mine worked on particular roads which were being built in Runcorn, and the people that he worked with were from Widnes, and they were up in arms about the fact that Widnes was going to become part of Cheshire in the local government organisation, which I think was in 1975, possibly at that time. And Widnes has always been prior to that, had been in Lancashire, I think.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it found itself in Cheshire, and these people said, we're not part of Cheshire, we're in Lancashire. And I know
it's familiarity.
It is, and there are people, I think, is it Southport that's part of Merseyside now, but they think they should be part of Lancashire and are actually moving to get themselves reinstated as. And I know people who live in St Helens, and the fact that you have to put St Helens Merseyside instead of St Helens Lancashire.
It's something that, again, familiarity, but it's people are comforted by the fact that they belong, and once they lose that, it becomes.
But belong to what? Belong to the human race, and we all treat each other equally.
Well, I'm the same.
So there are 6 boroughs in the Liverpool City region, and there are parts of it which are very disadvantaged, and there are parts of it like Sefton which are not quite so disadvantaged. And it's a real mix, and I think it's got a very good chance of making a big impact on people's lives. And I think, although this is personalising things, I think the relationship between Steve Rotherham and Andy Burnham, they're very similar people, and they have similar aspirations and very passionate commitments to their areas, and they're working together so that the two, and it's sort of almost by accident, it's not just Liverpool City region and Greater Manchester, it's become the North West, and I think
not Northern Powerhouse.
Not localism, not Northern Powerhouse. But I think people would be more comfortable if we said we're in the northwest.
Yes, I think
because we identify with the northwest,
yeah.
and that's what it's about, really, making sure that the northwest can meet the aspirations of the people that live in the northwest.
I've always said, I said to Mike Ainsbury too, and I've said it to other people, that I think Runcorn and Halton has had an identity crisis for so long, and it needs to decide its future. And that question, the reason why I'm asking that question is because we need to decide whether we are going to commit completely and then go for it. And stop differing between that argument, because I believe we should be focusing...
Sorry, go for what?
The Liverpool City region, because at the moment people are still having that bickering match between each other about whether there's still a Cheshire town or...
So do you think we should change people's psychology to, or the way they feel about it?
The benefits of it, because accountability, they get scared that the bigger space becomes, the less they're able to say something.
I think we're on the way to being. I don't know if you've ever seen or even heard of these days. You have to say that, but Monty Python, and the famous Monty Python sketch in is it the Life of Brian, where they say, well, what have the Romans ever done for us? And they say, well, there's roads. All right, apart from roads, what are the Romans? Well, roads and education. All right, apart from and it goes on and on and on. And what have the Liverpool City region ever done for us is a question people rightly ask. And so there is a document that I could give you, I can give anybody that asks for it, which basically answers that question. Look at the things that the Liverpool City region has done and is about to do for us. And there is a lot of money that's come from the Liverpool City region into Halton, and it's having a positive effect, and it will continue to have a positive effect. And I think if you're against that, then that's not pragmatic. That's not looking at things the way they are. It's objecting to a word, I think.
Yeah, well, it's like you said about Halton, St Helens.
Yeah.
And these words that become comforting. Cheshire, a town, words becoming a part of a city, region, sounds. Yeah.
It comforts me when I'm driving back up. If I've been down south and I'm driving up the motorway and I see the northwest.
I love it when I cross into Wales.
Coming home.
When you get that and you're going towards Wales and you see the sign Wales, I like that. I like the fact that we're so close to something so different, but yet similar. Do you get me? I just want to know more about you personally now.
Okay.
And where were you born?
I was born in St Helens.
You immigrants.
Yeah, well, there you go. You see us. You're out of your comfort zone. But after graduating, I moved to Runcorn. So I've lived in Runcorn since the 1970s in one way or another. So
you've really seen the change of it being a smaller town to a bigger town?
Yeah.
And how's that been? Obviously...
Frustrating.
In what way?
There are, you talk about the Liverpool City region, you talk about the word Liverpool, and I think
there's the city region, not Liverpool, the city region.
But I think it's the word that matters in what you were saying.
Yeah.
And I think there are elements of that with regards to the word Runcorn, maybe even the word Halton, and that there are agencies, there's lots of work opportunities in Runcorn.
Yes.
But those work opportunities are sometimes not available to people who live in Runcorn. That's my view. And these days, a lot of companies, especially medium-sized companies, small to medium-sized companies, won't have their own in-house recruitment services. They'll use agencies. And sometimes those agencies will be based in Warrington.
Yes.
And sometimes those agencies will be advertising. A lot of it will be online these days, but they'll still have the word Warrington in it, and they will almost be expecting to fill job vacancies with people from Warrington. I mean, you made reference to the Daresbury developments, the housing development.
Yes.
Is it called Daresbury Garden Village or something?
Garden Village, yeah. Sounds pretty.
It does. But if you go onto those websites, it will have Daresbury, Warrington.
Yeah.
And Warrington has got a positive psychological profile. Whereas Runcorn, sometimes, to me, people think, oh, Runcorn. I say I come from Runcorn, and if they've heard of it, which in this area they have heard of it, because you go 20 miles away, Runcorn, what's that? Oh, it's near Liverpool. Oh, right.
Yeah, I've had that conversation so many times.
And they think there's something not right, you know. And it used to happen when I was teaching in Runcorn. If we had what were called moderation meetings, so years and years and years ago, for instance, you had English GCSE, which was 100% coursework. And so to make sure that everybody was marking to the same kind of standard, you had moderating meetings. And so we were in Cheshire Education Authority then. So we used to get schools from around Cheshire that would come together to do moderating. And, you know, they would have a view of Runcorn before they came to Runcorn and have a view of the kids that were in Runcorn. And I remember one advisor actually saying, well, this is Runcorn, the intellectual epicentre of the world. And it was such a glib thing to say, you know, and the time had gone to challenge it because it was in a forum that with lots and lots of people. You couldn't just put your hand up and say, just a minute, what did you just say? But later on in private you could do that. But then the damage was done because it was out there. And that's the way people felt about Runcorn. And I hoped that as we evolved, then the attitude towards Runcorn, because I live in Runcorn, so I'm not saying Halton, I'm saying Runcorn. Yeah. The attitude to Runcorn hasn't changed. Yeah. That's my impression, that people still feel that. They still feel that it's not quite as good as it could be, or even not quite as good as it could be, but not quite good. And I would hope, I remember when 20 years ago we had a subcommittee called the Social Inclusion Subcommittee. And it was a subcommittee of the Education Committee. And at the time, teenage pregnancy was a big issue in Runcorn. I can't remember the percentages because I haven't prepared that. But we were concerned about it. And so we established a teenage pregnancy worker. And his job, because it was a he at the time, his job was to look at the research that was out there in other countries, like in Holland, and the work that they'd done to reduce teenage pregnancies. And we said, after a few months, people were saying, nothing's happening. And we said, you know, after a few months, what do you think's going to happen? This is a 20-year project. Now, look back 20 years, look at those figures, look at the figures now, and they're dramatically different. So we can do things, but it takes a lot of time. And I would want places that, I mean, I've mentioned Windmill Hill once, which is part of Norton North, and there's so much potential within Windmill Hill and the people who live within Windmill Hill, and yet we're still not moving that on. We're still not enabling the people that live there to meet all of their aspirations in the way that I would like. So when I say frustrating, and when I'm frustrated, I see so much potential in young people, and it's not always realised through no fault of their own. And just in the last couple of years, that's been set back even further because of COVID and kids not being in school, and now kids starting school not ready for school, and literacy levels, and we have to reset that. We have to revisit it and make sure we're doing the best we can. It
terrifies me because my kids are in high school age now. Well, one's in high school now, the other's just about, and it terrifies me what's next and how to motivate them into what's happening. You know, because I know a lot. Tech and industry now, you know, he's mentioned Daresbury before. It'd be nice to get them into something like that. But what has Runcorn got, do you think, apart from, like you say, the factories and the warehouses? What would you like Runcorn to be a pioneer in, apart from Daresbury?
I'd like it to be a pioneer in, you know, when I've used, I mean, you call it a platitude, no borough left behind. I would like it to be a pioneer in being able to say, no child left behind. Every child who lives in Runcorn and is going to school in Runcorn will be, we can't possibly guarantee it, but I'd love it to say, we guarantee you will meet your potential. Whatever your potential is, you will realise it if you are brought up in Runcorn. that's utopian, but that's what I would like. I'm the chairman of the Children, Young People and Families Policy and Performance Board, so everything to do with children we scrutinise that. And there is so much goes on. Like we've recently looked at, I don't know how many people know, but the government said there was a website that I can't remember now because again I've not prepared this. Oh, everyone invited, right? It was when there was sexual abuse taking place in schools, and there was one particular school where one student put something out, created a website and said, look, I'm sick of this, I'm sick of us having to put up with this at school all the time. And so it is now expected that peer-on-peer abuse will not be accepted in schools. So when Ofsted go into a school now, they ask for the information to do with not just sexual abuse, because that would be definitely straight away, that would be reported and would be acted upon, but sexual harassment, sexual language. How many times have you heard a boy call a girl, begins with an S and ends with a G, and it's almost become accepted. And what we've said is that's not acceptable. And Ofsted have said it's not acceptable. And if they go into a school and they say, can I see your records with regards to these three things, sexual abuse, sexual harassment, sexual language, it's unacceptable to say, we haven't got any records, we don't have any of that behaviour, because Ofsted are saying you have that behaviour and you must record that behaviour and you must be acting upon it. So we, as a Policy Performance Board, we said, and we raised it at council through two councillors, Councillor Loftus and Irene Bramwell. This is the motion that we're putting forward, where we expect all schools to do the following things and protect girls, because it's girls especially that are suffering from this. And very often, girls are sometimes victimised, and like if there is upskirting, which is illegal now,
yes.
But if there's upskirting, then sometimes the response has been, oh, well, wear trousers. Well, they shouldn't have to do that. That's switching the onus. It's the people who are doing that are at fault. And we've laid it out that we expect in our schools that to be taken very seriously. So I'm the governor of schools. I've checked that the schools are using the systems that are out there now, which are safeguarding systems, which are much, much better than they used to be years and years ago. And most schools, all schools are using those systems. So again, in Halton, in Runcorn, if you go to school in Halton or Runcorn, we want you to be safe. We insist that you're safe in school, because that's what parents want. There are two things they want, or three things. They want their kids to be safe, happy, and achieving.
Yes,
but the most important thing is that they're safe.
Yes. Well, I've noticed, based on your background and what you've told me today, you've got this passion for the next generation. It goes above and beyond, so everything you do seems to be directed in that direction.
Yep.
Where does that come from?
I don't know. But you're right, it is there. It is there, yeah.
It's you can't scratch, isn't it? It's something that you can't bear.
I can't bear it. I do scratch it because I'm currently working with, and it's not something I'd even thought about. I mean, in the past, I've always worked. When I was a deputy head, my responsibility was the well-being of children, safeguarding and all the things that go with that. And I'd never thought that in 1 week I'd be working with a Syrian child, a Guatemalan child, a Vietnamese child, and these are all children who are with their families, who've come to this country as a safe haven somewhere that's a refuge for them, for the difficulties they've had. And that's an extra itch now. How do we integrate those people? How do we help those? So, yes, it is a passion, but I'm always wary of saying I have a passion for young people. Because you think, how can I rephrase that?
Look, you've obviously took it upon yourself and gone above and beyond to make sure that they're protected. That's the biggest issue for you, and also to reach their potential. And as a councillor, do you think you're able to do that better than most, like an MP would, or?
Yeah, it comes back, doesn't it, to local accountability, and local people know what's right for their area, and they know how best to do that, and they know how best to put it into practice. So, yes, and I've worked in, I think it's 6 high schools in different deliberately in different. So from Brookvale in Runcorn, I went to Wilmslow. Now, do you know Wilmslow?
I know of it. I don't know whereabouts.
Right.
Is it south?
No, it's south of Manchester, but it's a very affluent area.
Oh, right. Okay.
And I needed to see the other side. So, and that was fascinating because within Wilmslow High School, there were people who could easily afford to send their kids to private schools, but they had a commitment to state education. They wanted their kids to go to state education. And it was fascinating to see those people who, I remember one child from one of those families saying to me, do you go skiing, sir? Well, I don't go skiing. But that's because I don't like the cold. But anyway, no. Oh, you should. The skiing in Colorado is wonderful. I was saying, Colorado? You go skiing in Colorado? I thought you were going to say the ski slope down Runcorn, but no, Colorado. And so that was outside my experience, let alone the kids that I was teaching previously in Runcorn, and getting that different perspective. That was a very nice boy, by the way, that said that.
Yeah.
And again, I remember him now just saying that. I entered kids in the public speaking competition, the English speaking debating competition, which had very clear rules, and so I entered the team, and we went through and we won, and we got through to the quarterfinals. But what struck me was that what they were doing, if we're doing public speaking in Brookvale, I would have to explain to them, this is what you need to do. But these kids, suddenly they were at the parents' dinner parties. Hello, everyone. How are you today? And it was, nobody taught them that. They just took it in. And I thought that brought home to me the advantages that kids have without realising they've got those advantages, and the disadvantages that kids have that we don't know they've got those disadvantages. Things which, if you go for a job and you have an interview and you're sitting there and you're like this, through no fault of your own, and then somebody else comes in and goes, good afternoon, everyone, thank you for having me here, and you're totally at ease because that's the experience you've had. That's the experience that they teach at public schools.
Yeah. And
so there's that disadvantage, which is, there's an obvious disadvantage you can see when you read the data, but when you're actually in it on a day-to-day basis and you see the things that you thought, I'd never thought of that. And when I moved from here, which I did after 3 years, I will be making sure that those things I'm saying, and then you get into the whole literacy thing, and how do you improve the literacy of kids, and what does that actually mean? So when a kid says to me, but sir, you sound posh, when you say that word, you sound posh. No, I'm building up your literacy skills. I'm not teaching you to be posh. Yeah. And I'm not asking you to change your accent at all, but I do want you to improve your vocabulary.
Vocal training, because he's from Liverpool, aren't you? Born and bred. He's proper Scouse. Well, I'm from Runcorn, but I did RP training, for acting and performing. Right. So everything I say now sounds a bit more hello, and it feels weird to some people. But when you go to Manchester, they can hear the little Scouse.
Oh yeah.
It's in there. But it's weird at the same time. We're going to finish up a little bit now because I've been here for a while, and usually these interviews go for about an hour and a half. But obviously I want to wrap it up when it's natural and stuff like that. So obviously Labour, you're a Labour values sort of person, so have you always been Labour? Have you always had those values?
Yep.
What attracted you to Labour?
Social justice.
Explain what that means to you.
I don't like inequality, I don't like unfairness, and the way that I saw the society that we live in, still see the society that we live in, going back to what I was talking about before, some people have a better start, a fairer start, and not an unfair start in life than other people. That's not fair. And then I suppose we all, although we can intellectualise things, I think a lot of our beliefs and values are rooted in our own experience and how we were brought up. And I know that my dad, who he was a very fair person, but he wasn't very fair when it came to his own education. He had reached a point, and obviously this was a long, long time ago, he could not go from his primary school to the grammar school, which the exams for which he had passed, because his family needed him to go out and work as soon as possible. That wasn't fair on him. He hated that. He resented that his life. He didn't resent an individual. He just resented the system. And I think that he communicated that to me, that it wasn't fair that people like him, who came from an ordinary working class background, could not reach their potential, which I suppose is what I was talking about before, isn't it?
Yeah.
I hadn't realised that, but that's exactly. So my personal experience was that some people were held back. They could not, because of the nature of society, realise their potential, and that's wrong. And the Labour Party has that as its foundation. You should be able to achieve what you can achieve.
Yeah, that gets to me too, especially with, you mentioned kids before. I hate lack of potential. The potential's there, but it's not exploited. Exploited is the wrong word. I say that to him all the time. You've got so much potential, but you're not realising it. And to me, does the Labour Party stand for that?
Yes.
Better than anyone else?
Yes. It's the only answer. Yes.
Obviously, I was a Labour supporter myself years ago, but I got disenfranchised with Labour. So is Keir Starmer the right person to lead you forward then? Because he seems to be a bit on the fence a little bit too much.
I think at the moment, the Labour Party needs to win power. Because otherwise we're just a talking shop. If we don't have power, we're not going to change anything. So he has a view as to how we should win power. So I am behind the leader of the Labour Party. Whoever the leader of the Labour Party is, I will trust them. Because we will share the same values. Otherwise we wouldn't be in the Labour Party. And therefore Keir Starmer has a view as to how best to achieve that power, to get into power without losing the values.
Yeah.
Because maybe in the not too distant past there was a time when the Labour values, you thought, well, is it actually the Labour values to attack Iraq? You know, that's maybe not quite the right thing to be doing. At the moment, we are ahead in the polls, in the opinion polls, which we know they don't really mean anything, but it does show that maybe some people who were uncertain to whether they could trust Labour, maybe they're thinking they can.
Well, priorities have changed.
Yeah.
People's outlook on the world is starting to go, actually, we need something a bit different than what we've got. And do you think the local elections are going to be really good for you coming? Oh, in fact, I asked that question before, didn't I? People see the national problems translated into local problems. Do you think people are going to swing support to Labour and give you a good support?
Do you mean locally or
locally? Yeah.
Very locally, like in Norton North, is that what you're saying?
Anywhere. But obviously for you, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, I my answer to your previous question still holds, that I would hope that people would see that Labour politicians represent the people that they're voted to represent and listen to them.
Yeah.
Because that's something that you hear a lot. Nobody's listening, nobody's taking any notice, and that's very frustrating for those people who have that feeling, but it's also very frustrating for those of us who are genuinely trying to listen and trying to act upon the wishes of the residents. You can't. I get emails from people who are not nice in their emails, and you just have to think, well, I always think, well, there's a reason for you feeling like that. There is something that's making you feel like that.
So you've got a bit of a disconnect, because the thing is, how do you cope with that? That's something, because you're obviously trying your best to do everything you can, whether it's the opposition housing, or helping people with the bushes, or helping people with the umbrella stop.
Yep.
But it's never enough.
No, it's not, and you have to recognise that.
That'd get to me.
You just have to say, I mean, we have a saying in the education world, it's the unloved, or the unlovable who need our love the most. Those kids that are really causing the problems for you, there's a reason for them being like that. And very often, if not always, that reason is lack of love. And those those reasons don't just go away when that person becomes 18 and becomes an adult. You know, whatever caused them to feel internal strife and resentment, and I've got to hit out and I've got to get at somebody, those things are there. And you know, you may see some think this is totally naive, but I think that the only way we will achieve that society that I want and that you used to want before you lost faith in the Labour Party, which is one where society is fair and just, we will help those people not to have those feelings. I think there's going to be problems for us in a few years' time when the kids who have missed out on education now through COVID, and also the things that are attached to that. I mean, we see the extremes when we see on the television news or whichever news outlet online one watches. Those kids who have been so badly treated by adults, you can't imagine how another human being would treat that kid like that. But there are kids now who have not been treated so extremely, but have been treated badly by people who themselves have been treated badly because of the situation they're in. And even things like the cost of living crisis now, that's going to result in children's mental health being damaged.
Yes, and even more compounded.
Yeah. And so those people now that say nasty things to me, there will be a reason for that. And the reason for that is because we haven't had a Labour government. That's ridiculous, isn't it? But we haven't achieved social justice.
A country votes a certain way, and they vote for values, don't they? So they take that values into government, and then it becomes the national consensus.
Yeah. It should be. It should be that they vote for values and they vote for policies. It shouldn't be because they vote for somebody because he's got hair that sticks out all over the place and acts like a clown.
Are you talking about something in particular?
It's up to you. I can interpret that. But that's what people do. And I don't understand that. People say to me, but don't you realise you need a front man? And I'm saying we shouldn't need a front man. I don't believe in the cult of the individual.
That's not what British politics is about. We're about values and
we should be, yeah.
Which direction do you want to go in? Let's go that way and see where that takes us. Whereas now we've gone Americanised, which is very much like the statesman. And what does he look like in the leadership role? Yeah. That's completely the opposite of what we vote for. We don't vote for that.
No. Well, we shouldn't do that.
We
shouldn't do that. No.
So let's say you get back in, you're councillor. What do you want to do next in your role? Just continue with what you're doing. What's your main goal?
At the moment, I think my main concern is that I've just mentioned it really, and it is the mental health of children. I really think that there's a crisis waiting, and this crisis is in children's mental health and the way in which we deal with it. And I think we've got to recognise it first of all. And I think schools have got to be able to not just recognise, because they do, because schools are full of people who understand kids and what needs to be done, but they don't have necessarily the resources, and I don't necessarily mean physical resources, it could be human resources, to deal with those kids who are struggling, because it's very much, you must achieve these particular standards, you must achieve these exam results. That's what we are testing you on, that's what we're assessing you on as a school, rather than how happy are the kids who come to this school. Because if they are happy kids, they will achieve. But if they're unhappy, they won't achieve.
Absorb things, won't they? Like a sponge.
Yeah.
If they're happy.
So what I want to do is to make sure, and I've already started to do this with my colleague who's the chair of the Health Policy and Performance Board, because there's a crossover between health and children, obviously, but children's health, and that there are things going on which we will have more data about in the coming months, which you can see how things are. How many referrals have there been to things like CAMS, the Child and Adult Mental Health Service, and they're overwhelmed. They've got too many referrals, and it's those things. It's at the moment it's very difficult to quantify in a conversation like this, but it's to make sure that we are addressing the needs of children whose well-being, whose mental health is not as strong as it needs to be. We can't expect them to achieve their full potential if they're not balanced and feeling happy.
Exactly. Your main goal is to just help as many children as possible
to realise their potential.
Yes.
Yep.
Definitely. probably going to end the interview there because we're going to talk all day. It's been an absolute pleasure to have on. If people want to support you, what's the best way to support you? Apart from voting, of course. Can they click on his website? Is there a Facebook page? Do people do things?
Talking about mental health and well-being, I fear that the obsession with Facebook and Facebook Lite and all those other things, I see it in action in school. I see the impact it has on young people. And I think the genie's out of the bottle, we can't put it back in, but we need a lot of regulation, and we need a lot of, these kids they're obsessed.
The problem I've got is with TikTok. I hate TikTok because TikTok is don't start here. Harry. TikTok is a 30-second clip based platform, which you can waste a whole day doing that, and its attention spans are diminishing because of it. YouTube's a good platform. This is where this is going, but I agree. Social media needs to be properly vetted and regulated. Yeah. But the question was, how can people support you in your campaign?
Yeah,
really?
but you said is there Facebook and so on. I don't trust it. I don't think it's. I think it's bad for human. This is going to sound ridiculous.
It's your view.
I think it's bad for humanity. I think it's bad for human beings, and if I sign up to that, I'm colluding with it.
I agree. I'm only on Facebook on the page. When I was acting, I come off it more and more, but I'm on YouTube. That's my thing. But if it's a tool to use for your campaign, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. So if people want to speak to me, or if they want to contact me, then I've got email, I've got telephone, I've got a front door.
You got a front door?
Yeah, they can knock on it. I can knock on theirs. We have surgeries. Although with COVID we couldn't have surgeries.
That's frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'm willing to be persuaded that I should have some kind of social media presence, because there are councillors that do that. They have it.
To be honest, I found you, and I found you through your leaflet.
Through my leaflet, right? Yep. Yeah.
So it still works.
I know Mike Ainsbury. He's a big,
always tweeting himself senseless.
Yeah. He's tweeting all the time. He tweets. What's his favourite? Sausage or bacon butter?
But he gets it. The social media is powerful stuff, but don't let it get over you, because it can get you.
And he says to me, and he'll quote numbers, quote figures. I get so many contacts, that not flippant ones, people getting in touch with him through that. And I said, well, what did they used to do? Because if they really want to get in touch with you, they'll get in touch with you.
Exactly.
So you're saying to me that MPs didn't get any contacts before 2008 when smartphones came out? No, they'd phone you up, they'd write to you.
Yeah.
They'd post it.
Yeah.
And they'd take the time, and taking that time makes you think, no, I better not write that. So when somebody puts on something, Geoff Logan is useless, I'm thinking, well, which I've read, because somebody said to me, look at this, you're useless. Yes, hashtag useless. Well, come on, I don't know you. You're telling me I'm useless. No, you're not telling me. You're telling the world I'm useless.
See, I do like your style, because for me, social media, I've had a bad experience with social media. I don't like it. I think it distracts me too much. I tend to like going for walks and listening to audiobooks, and that's it. But for a modern campaign, you expect people like councillors and MPs to be like tweeting themselves senseless. So it's refreshing to hear that.
It's retro, isn't it?
It's really good. So what's the best way then?
I'll say it again, knocking on the door. Emails, post. Carrier pigeon works sometimes.
Pulling the cord.
Very few. Traditional methods which are not going to damage, or didn't in my experience damage, people's mental health.
Yes.
Because it's there to just... I mean, I read, you said audiobooks, I read physical books because I'm fully retro. Yeah. And Dave Eggers has written 2 books. One, The Circle, you may have seen the film The Circle, which had Tom Hanks in it, but that was a social media company and how it went wrong. And then his latest book, which is called The Every, which is, as the title is, the social media company becomes everything. So it's a combination of Amazon and Facebook and all the rest of it. And it's, well, that's what the book is. It is scary. And it dehumanises. The people in the characters in that novel stop becoming human as we know it. Now that people will say, well, are you telling me that me being on Facebook is stopping me being a human being? I think that eventually it will. Because eventually, a big part of being a human being is making choices and having choices. And one aspect of social media is to stop you having choices and directing you to where you should be having.
I think it puts a wall up and puts you in a group. It categorises you as a group member.
Well, it doesn't. Its algorithms will say, this is the group you're in. You want these things, don't you? You really want these things, and you want to do this, and you want to believe this. Don't you want to believe this? Yeah, and if you believe that, then you must go down that path as well. And suddenly,
so it's taken away.
You've gone as an individual.
And I liked it. I like what we're doing now, which is the conversation we're having in person. I've always liked to meet people in person or talk on the phone. I've never been, like you say, a social media juggernaut. But I do think YouTube's very valuable for getting information out and getting.
Okay, well you can help me. You can liaise with me and say, right, this is what you should be doing. This is how you should be using YouTube, because you're stuck in the 19th century, not the 20th.
You're not.
The 20th century.
I'd say 19th.
With your carrier pigeons.
But carrier pigeons and coal and stuff. But look, I like that because it means that you're switched on to real issues that are in the area. You're listening to the birds, you're listening to people, you're going out and meeting people physically, and that's powerful. People don't do that anymore.
No.
So I'm really happy with that. But anyway,
good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And if you want to support him, don't bother on social media.
Don't look for me.
And you represent Norton North.
Norton North, yeah.
And
which is Windmill Hill, some of Murdershaw, and Norton and Norton Cross.
So I hope you've enjoyed the interview.
I have, yeah.
Right.
You made me speak without thinking, which isn't a good thing, is it?
Well, it's a good thing for me because it means that I'm getting to what you're really saying rather than anything else.
Yes, what I'm really thinking.
Exactly. Anyway, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
See you later.
Thank you, Harry.